Hello everyone and welcome back to another custom spotlight. Before we get into today's custom, let me just show off this that I've been working on. This is the Play-Rail ringing Phillip, produced by Play-Rail. Play-Rail never made a motorized Phillip, and I'm kind of glad they didn't because Trackmasters is ugly. But I thought the proportions of this one matched Phillip really well. The only problem is that it had an annoying thing on the inside that ringed. It made a ringing noise every time you rolled him around. He made a ringing noise. So I modded this and I actually took... I opened him up and I took out the little bell thing inside of him. So now he's just a regular non-motorized engine. In fact, if you listen really carefully, you can hear the little thing in there that's supposed to hit the bell. You can hear it hitting against something plastic inside of him. Like, I'm assuming you hear that. But anyway, that's basically Phillip. Anyway, let's talk about today's custom. He technically isn't finished yet. I have a few more minor details that I still need to add to him. And there's some things I'm just not going to bother with. But as of right now, he is complete. He is the biggest custom that I have worked on, literally, and technically, figuratively as well. The one and only Flying Scotsman. So, you may have been wondering to yourself, why are Streamlined Thomas and Shooting Star Gordon here? Because, for those of you who don't know, Trackmaster 2 had this thing years ago where they were like, they had greatest moments packs. And they would usually tie into the current special or season of the show. And when The Great Race was coming out, they made 3 greatest moments packs to tie into the movie. They did a Shooting Star Gordon, they did a Flying Scotsman, and they did a variant of Thomas called Trophy Thomas, which was basically Thomas with lightning bolts on the side and a little trophy car. But and then they did a streamlined variant in a set, even though it would have just made more sense to make Thomas's Greatest Moments pack his streamlined form with Annie and Clarabelle. But anyway, so Play-Rail did their own also releases the engines in 3 packs primarily. And I thought it weird that they never tried something in a similar fashion. Like, they had 2 Great Race models, one of which was already a Greatest Moments pack character. All 3 of these are characters that Greatest Moments packs technically did for the Great Race. A variant of Thomas, Shooting Star Gordon, but they never made the 3rd and final character of the Greatest Moments pack trio. So, I took it upon myself to make him myself. Now, these tenders may look familiar to you. That's because this custom right here is the only reason that I really sought after the new 2025 motorized Scotsman. I didn't really care too much about the model. It's just a nice thing to have, I suppose, because I'd never owned the original Flying Scotsman, so I guess it was nice to own this. But ultimately, the thing that sold me on this was when the idea came to my head to use the tenders for a play rail custom Scotsman. And this wasn't the intention when I bought this Gordon, but this is the same Gordon you saw in the TV in Thomas a Toy Engine Season 1 in the later half. I painted it up to look like Flying Scotsman. Now, for those of you who are worrying, don't worry. I do have a new Gordon on the way, an actual play rail one that will be appearing in Thomas a Toy Engine from here on out. So, don't worry about me not having a Gordon. I purposefully waited until after I purchased that Gordon from Japan to make this custom. Also, I found out after the fact that my Gordon was actually a knockoff, so I figured, why not make it into Flying Scotsman? At least use it for something unique. Now I'm sure you're probably saying, why don't you decouple it from the tenders so we can get a closer look at the actual engine itself? Well, that's something I didn't actually think. This is something I didn't actually think about when I was making this, but I later realized was a thing I wanted to test out on this because of the way these tenders are designed. So, a little while ago, I bought this pack that had a bunch of play rail front and rear couplings. And the main reason I bought it was so I could get some couplings for my custom Ray. I wanted to get couplings for that. And I had a bunch of spare ones laying around. And the pack, and if I'm just to fish one of them out, the pack came with a bunch of these, with a couple of these couplings. These are tender couplings. If I'm to bring up an engine like James, who doesn't use this kind, but who doesn't use the same exact kind, but it's basically like this. They're couplings that permanently join the engine to their tender. Because an engine like James, you can't take the tender off. The tender is not supposed to come off, primarily because that's where you put the battery, so you can even run James. And he bumped into Scotsman, who's right in front of him. Let me just put his case back on. But I think you see where what I wanted to do. So I wanted to test out to see if those actually worked, and I used Scotsman to test it because if I'm to pull up the second tender here, it's also true for the first one. The new style front couplings for Trackmaster motorized engines are made to fit on this little pole thing so they can swivel. If I'm to pull up a piece of Tomy rolling stock, we'll use Toby's truck. Originally, they didn't have like side-to-side swivel. Not really, anyway. They mostly just went up and down. It was the back part that was on a little pole that swiveled. But for some reason, Trackmaster 2 came along and insisted that that little swivel bit needed to be at the front, and the back needed to have this weird, stupid static coupling. Which doesn't really matter for tender engines because they have super long couplings in the back now for some stupid freaking reason. So when I was working on Scotsman, I wanted to test out these tender couplings. I'll just put it right there so I have it on hand. I wanted to test them out. So what I did was I took apart this rear tender and took the rear coupling out of Gordon and put one of these tender couplings in between the two to see if this would still function decently well on the layout. This worked perfectly. I was absolutely astounded by how well this works. Like, this guy is not hindered at all. It really shows that Trekmaster should just go back to doing it this way. Although I do kind of like that you could decouple the tenders for certain engines. I think for some of them, they should just go ahead and put tender couplings in there. It literally just works better. Like, this guy isn't even hindered on hills, which is the main thing I was worried about. Not even on this track. Like the American Trackmaster 2 track. They're not even hindered on that. In fact, part of me even considered, like, cutting out this stupid rear back coupling and adding another tender coupling, right, like on this one, in between this tender and the engine. Because there is actually a pole on the inside of here that I could connect the coupling to if I really wanted to. And inevitably I probably will, either with one of these other back couplings or just a tender coupling. But ultimately I kind of like that you can decouple this one, because the real Flying Scotsman in the real world, whenever it had its smoke deflectors, it only had one tender. Like, it didn't have both tenders. In the show, however, they always gave him two tenders and his smoke deflectors. Which, I mean, I get wanting to make him look like Flying Scotsman. Like, I don't know. I feel like they either needed to ditch the second tender or the smoke deflectors. I don't know. Also, I thought it was weird that Player never made Flying Scotsman. Like, he was reintroduced into the show in 2016, and we only got one new Flying Scotsman toy, and that was the Trekmaster 2 one. They had already re-released the wooden railway model a few years ago, so I guess they just didn't see a reason to do that again. And only now are we getting more Flying Scotsman merch, and I cannot for the life of me understand why. Like, he's not in the current iteration of the show, so I don't know why he's even a character anymore. Like, I don't get why this model even exists, and it's even more strange because now Bachmann is making him. Like, is this indicative of anything? Does anyone out there think Scotsman might actually return someday? Because in my head, I'm just like, I can't see any reason why Scotsman is getting a new motorized model and a Bachmann model around the same time if there wasn't some type of future for the character. I almost want to be hopeful and say maybe we will get Flying Scotsman in a future iteration of the show. I mean, they do have something new Thomas planned for next year, so something new Thomas related planned for next year, 2026. So, who knows? I mean, we got Duck in Motorized too. I don't own him yet, but we are getting Duck, so who knows? Maybe they do have plans for more classic characters. And they're starting to acknowledge Edward and Henry again, too. That's pretty cool. It's nice that it seems like Mattel is starting to listen to the fans a little bit more. Not really by much, but they are still starting to listen. Like, Playrel recently announced, like, a new tar-covered James. Like, that's great. So yeah, I have hope. But anyway, back to Scotsman. he isn't exactly the most accurate. Like, for example, his dome color. It's his dome cover is basically just Gordon's. I know in the show he has this large banjo dome, but ultimately I didn't really know how to make a Tommy Gordon have a banjo dome. I could have just taken it off this Scotsman and just glued it on this one, but I still want this Scotsman to be intact fully on the off chance I wanted to ever run this thing with the tenders again. That's why I made this tender coupling removable, and why, if I'm to grab it, I still have the original coupling that this tender hooked up to. So on the off chance I did want to run this motorized Scotsman again, I could just take off the tender coupling, put this one back on, and run him with his tenders. So everything about aside from the paint, everything about these tenders is made to be reversible, so you could put them back on Gordon on the previous Scotsman model it came with, and it'd basically be fine. That's why I didn't repaint the wheels on this tender or anything. Literally the only thing this tender has had changed is the tender coupling. But anyway, also about this Scotsman. He doesn't have the nameplate that Scotsman has here. Mainly, I thought that if I tried to make one out of paper or cardboard, it would be too flimsy. And ultimately, I figured it would just get lost too easily. So I'm willing to just leave it off. And also, his wheels are black. I know Scotsman is supposed to have green wheels. My justification is I didn't know how to paint these. I really don't have much experience, because this model I actually used spray paint this time. I spray painted this model. Just like how I spray painted Ray, another comparison between the Scotsman model and Ray. And just like how I spray painted Ray, I spray painted Scotsman. So this body is entirely spray painted. The only reason I did that is because, one, I thought the shade of green I had spray paint matched really well with these tenders. And secondly, I didn't have a paint pen that was the right color of green. So I just used spray paint. I don't know how to spray paint these wheels. That's the main issue. So these wheels are just black Sharpie marker with white outlines. I know it's not super accurate and they don't really match the tender too well. But ultimately, when he's running around, you shouldn't really notice the tender wheels because they're hidden in shadow. I would have liked to get a CGI face for Flying Scotsman, since he mainly only appeared in the CGI series. But I'm fine with this model series 1, for right now anyway. Maybe someday I'll buy, like, another CGI Gordon and give the face to him, like with buffer eyebrows. Also, his smoke deflectors are just cardboard. I have them blue tacked on right now. I'm thinking I'll glue them, but I'm not super sure. I honestly really wanted these to be removable, because I'm also kind of thinking that if I really wanted to, I could paint Gordon's regular tender in the same green as Scotsman, and be able to change this between being a Scotsman model and a green Gordon in his original young and green livery. Because before Gordon came to the railway, he was green like Scotsman. So I'm thinking in my head, like, maybe in future I could paint up the Gordon tender that came with this model in green as well. So if I wanted to, I could remove this tender coupling and have a green Gordon for if I ever wanted to do that. Also, I know in the show, Scotsman is supposed to have a black running board, but I kept it white because I thought white just stood out more. I wanted to make this model look distinct. That's another reason why I wanted to keep the wheels, to make the wheels black, because I think he just stands out more this way. Ultimately, everything about this is changeable, so if I wanted to make this something else, I could. If I wanted this to be Green Gordon, I could make it that. If I wanted to give these tenders back to this Scotsman, I could do that. If I want to remove these smoke deflectors and make him a Railway Series accurate Scotsman, or even more accurate to how he looked in real life for a while, I could do that. If I want to make Green Arrow from the Railway Series, I could do that. But if I want to detach the rear tender, also have an accurate Scotsman in real life, I could do it. Most of the stuff about this model is changeable. But ultimately, I like Scotsman to look. I like the look of this Scotsman as he is. People may criticize him, and feel free to. If you think I did this guy poorly, let me know in the comments. Like, just scream into the I don't want to say scream into the void, because that kind of implies that I don't read the comments. I do, I swear. But, yeah, if you guys think I did poorly on this Scotsman, please, let me know. Like, what do you think I should, how should I improve, how could I improve him? Like, feel free to give me suggestions. I love hearing what people have to say about this stuff. Because ultimately, I plan to use most of the customs I make, I plan to use them in videos at some point. And yes, that means that Scotsman does have a future in Thomas the Toy Engine. It probably won't be for like a year, considering all the stuff I have to set up. But it is possible that he'll appear sometime in 2026, maybe later. But either way, I plan on making at least a few more videos with this model before I have to use him in the series. So this guy won't be going away anytime soon. And honestly, I think he just looks really nice alongside the other Great Race characters. Streamline Thomas, Shooting Star Gordon. Flying Scotsman just completes this trio. And I'm so sad that PlayerL didn't make him. Watch, in like 3 months from now, PlayerL is going to be like, oh, now we've made the Flying Scotsman. And I'm going to be like, oh, jeez. But honestly, if they do that, then I will just make this a Green Gordon. If they do that, then I will just make this a Green Gordon and buy that Scotsman instead. But as it stands, I think I'm basically said everything I can say about Flying Scotsman. There isn't really that much else to say about him. Aside from that, he looks really nice, and I think most people will probably like him when he comes into the series. So, with all that being said, thank you very much for watching. Long live the Flying Scotsman, both the real engine and the character in the TV show. And see you in the future. Flying Scotsman coming through.